Yeah, hi everybody. Again, yes, my name is Frank Moody. I am Education Relations for GameMaker, which is a 2D game engine, and we're going to talk a little bit about game design as well as GameMaker, the game engine itself. And hopefully this may spark some ideas for you on how to use game design in your classes. And so we'll get started. There's a huge amount of benefits of game design. Obviously, the very first top of that is critical thinking. In order to design a game, you have to really critically think not only about what you want to accomplish or the challenges and problems that may come up in the game, but you also have to critically think about your players and as they play the game, and are they playing the game in the way that you may have designed it to be? So there's a huge amount of critical thinking that goes into creating even a simple puzzle game or a narrative-based game. Communication in game design is very key. When students have to design a game, they have to communicate to each other about their goals. There's very few single uh, game makers in the world because it takes a long time to create a really good game. And those that have done the endeavor sometimes have taken 3 to 5 years of their lives just to create one game. Um, so most games are created in teams, so you have to have a huge amount of communication between the people who are creating the art, obviously between the people who are creating the game, those who are creating doing the programming of the game, and so forth. Another big benefit of game design is collaboration. Obviously, as the challenges come up, there's different ways to solve problems, and those problems have to be dealt with. You also have restrictions within your games because although we do have huge amounts of memory now in computers, you still can't you don't have like a never-ending supply of processing power. So you're going to come against challenges about what you want to accomplish and what you want to create. And everybody's going to have an opinion on what's important and what things you can give up or what things you can't give up. So collaboration and learning collaboration within game design is another huge benefit. Obviously, there's the huge amount of creativity that goes into a game. You have to be very creative in what you're working with, how your game is going to run, what kind of story, what kind of conflict you may have within your story. So creativity is a huge, huge benefit also of game design. Time management, I can't say enough about time management within creating games. You have to finish a project, so you have to have goals. You have to have, timelines and milestones of the things you're going to work with, and you have to be able to work as a team, and you have to finish and create goals. So time management, and then of course there is just abundance amount of problem solving. And of course, these are all the 21st century skills we want our students to use. We want them learning, we want them exposed to them so they can gain experience in working with them. So there's just a huge list of benefits that come just within game design or even the gamification process. Games have grown immensely, and games are everywhere now. And what used to be, oh, we're never going to have games or things in the classroom, we see more and more of that today. And I'm going to go into a few subject areas where I think that game design and GameMaker, of course, can be used in not just our traditional programming classes. So why should we be teaching game design? Well, game design also brings along with it an engagement. We have students who they're going to do problem solving, they're going to do have to pay attention to detail. They're going to have to work within teams, but also there's just the pure amount of that you're doing something rather than just gamification of a class where we may use a game to teach a lesson. This is hands-on experiential learning when you're designing your own game with that others will have to play. And it becomes very authentic in this process. Students have to work authentically and they're going to get authentic feedback especially if their player can't, if the game may be too difficult, maybe the game is too easy. There's going to be a lot of feedback and a lot of give and take. So there's a lot of approaches to teaching game design. Obviously, you can make a game step by step. There's a lot of resources on the internet for all of the major game engines. And I'll go into that more in detail a little later. But there are just huge amounts of resources out there for just making a game with a step-by-step video that, and I'll show you an example of one that we've created, but you can just make a game using a step-by-step video. You can make a game step by step with the teacher leading the class. The teacher can get up and say, this is what you're going to do, place X to Y. And you can make a project for your students to just interpret or look at a game that's there and, you know, basically reverse engineer the game. How did the person who made the game, how did they create it? What code did they use? I saw a great example just a few days ago of a kid who was giving a global presentation for digital citizenship. And she was very young. I would say she's probably in the 4th grade. But she brought right up that, you know, I just figured out how to do it by looking at someone else's game. And I saw the things I wanted in my game. And so I went in and learned how to do the things they had. So, you know, we can make projects for our students to just interpret what's going on, what were the mechanics. And this can be at all levels of games. Now, traditionally, and most of the time, we're looking at game design and we match it right away with computer science. And we can certainly silo that. We can have just a game design class, and we can certainly just work on the programming aspects or the computer science aspects. Game design is a very great way to teach computational thinking. It's also a great way to teach design thinking. Students have to look at the design process. They have to take things step by step. They have to learn problem solving. Certainly, game design and computer science match really well together. Even our beginner tutorials are basically following the Computer Science Teachers Association skills. We look at the level 2 and 3 standards of those aligned skills. So, you know, in the basics of just a game and creating a game, kids are going to learn algorithms, they're going to learn programming, they're going to understand the impacts of computing as they work with either limitations of hardware and software. But I think it goes beyond that. And I think especially when we get into game design and we take a class and maybe we're going to do a station rotation, we can look at a lot of different subjects. The first is art. In order to create a game, you're going to have game resources. You're going to have an object or something you're going to be working with. 2D game engines really can be a great resource for this. There's been a huge explosion in pixel art. The early games demanded that we use pixel art within early video game design. And the main reason for this were computer resources. We didn't have the memory nor the processing power to do what we can do today. But what we have found is that just pixel art itself has had a huge explosion, and we're teaching a lot of pixel art now in today's elementary and middle schools as a way for kids to understand how computer screens and designing for computer screens happen. There's also some other really great skills in terms of pixel art. Pixel art demands that you not just draw what somebody wants you to draw, but you actually have to design the art to fit what the resource is they're looking for. It also demands concentration, and you actually don't have as many resources with pixel art because you're limited with colors, and you're actually having to concentrate at one pixel at a time for your artwork. There's also the manipulation and movement of pixel art. And those designs and the pixel art designs have gone a long way now. Pixel art is the beginning of, you know, the basics of digital art and designing and drawing on a computer. So there's a great whole area here where game design and the humanities start with just the artwork. This includes music resources as well. Game design and the humanities, music resources are what bring games to life. If you've ever tried to play a game because you had to hide somewhere, whoops, sorry about that, and you couldn't have the music on, the game really isn't the same. The music resources within the game, the sound of hitting a wall or rubbing up against something, or if something blows up, you're going to want that sound. It's really just not the same without the music and the sounds that are created. So there's a whole digital area here of digital production and digital creation in terms of the music resources. Also, learning to use music as an emotional motivator. So there's no secret that in a game, as the action gets higher, if there's good music behind it and it's pumping it up, learning about these things and using music as emotional, as a motivator and creating emotion for the game, these are great skills for content creation. Also, music is used to build drama, of course. So as we're coming to the end of the game, or if we hit a sad point in a game, we're going to use music, and we have to learn how to use music in order to draw our audience in, or our players. Game design can also be used in the history area of teaching history. So rather than just hearing a story about a historical event or a time period, students can actually immerse themselves into a historical event or a time period. They can create their own video game based on that historical event. They can also create their own historical interpretations, narrative, and the critical choices of what they're showing in history. And how they're showing that history. So again, it's a very hands-on way, a very engaging way for students to get in, create a game that normally they may just write a book report on, or of course, today's world, the AI may write a book report for them and they just clean it up. So this is another way for them to really have an authentic voice and a lot of choice in the way that they're using game design to interpret and show their understanding of history. It also can reinforce cultural empathy. Obviously, students have to look at their game and look at what they're teaching, and as they basically put themselves into the moment of that historical moment, they really have to understand a lot more if they're making a game that someone else has to interpret what their feelings are. So they're going to have to take the other person's point of view of how they may interpret the choices that they made going into their game. In terms of language, I just can't say enough. In language, if you're learning Spanish or you're learning German or you're learning French, this can be a very powerful way for them to use dialogue rather than just trying to write dialogue even in a PowerPoint presentation. They have to create the dialogue using a second language. They have to interpret how that's going to work. Branching scenarios reinforce these communication skills. And I'll show you a quick way of that. Again, they're not taking time out of their actual language class to create these, because we have software now that helps create so much of it for us that they can really take their time, as long as at the same time that they're creating a game and that they're engaged with creating that game, they can also start to use their language skills. So I think this can be used in language classes. It also reinforces, again, cultural empathy. Because they're having to use a different language in the way they're interpreting and the way they're using that language, and they place that into their game design. There's just a lot of very high-level skills that can go into game design. Excuse me. So GameMaker. GameMaker was originally developed in 1999 by Professor Mark Overmars. He wanted to create an easy-to-learn 2D game-making tool. That was the goal of his project. And in order to create that easy to learn 2D game making tool that wouldn't so much get in the way of that, you have to have a whole new set of skills and spend 3 years learning to just create a game. You'd be able to get in very quickly. His goal was to get in and be able to use and create a game very quickly. Today, we have lots of different game engines, lots of different ways of making games. We have some very large 3D game engines that create some very huge games, even movies now. Even game engines today are being used now to even just look at how will all this snow in the Midwest. We can create models within game engines to see how that runoff and where flooding may take place. He created the 2D game engine, and he used visual and code languages and blended them together so that you had a tool where you could quickly, maybe you didn't want to learn code right away, so you could drag and drop and use different kinds of node systems to create these same effects that you could if you were just writing out the code. GameMaker today, we have a huge amount of free educator resources, and we continue to build educator resources every day. I'm going to go through a few of those later in this presentation. But we're still a growing game engine, and we have 1,700 new users sign up every day and across the world. We do have some major game engines that we have some major game companies, mainly independent games. But we do have some larger game companies that actually use GameMaker to prototype, because it's such a quick way for them to get something, see if it's even possible that the game idea that they're going with is usable and whether people will be able to play it. And then they may turn to a larger game engine. But Undertale is probably the biggest success within the GameMaker community. Undertale came out in 2015, and it's still a very, very popular game today, mainly because of the mechanics that made up the game. But it is a great example of a 2D game that was created by one person, Toby Fox, and again, has a whole spin-off of just became a very, very successful game. Again, as I said, it's a 2D game engine. It has a very shallow learning curve, meaning that you can get right in. And in fact, if you get in and you concentrate and you work hard at it, and you can probably make your first game in about 15 minutes. It is a visual programming, but it can also be a code-based programming. The example here shows you on the left side of your screen, you'll probably see that we have the visual side of basically creating a game and controlling an object. You can set the point direction, you can set speed, you can assign a variable, you can set the instance rotation. On the other side, you can see how it matches up with the actual GameMaker language in terms of writing out and saying what you're doing and how you're going to do it, and doing it by writing out the code. So it gives you two different ways. Coders will tell you it's a lot faster for me to just write the code, but there are some people still who just use the visual side because they feel like they have all the control. That same girl that I was talking about, she was using a different program, but I thought it was very interesting to see her mind working, because someone had asked her to go ahead and have her object fly through the air. And it was interesting to me because as she talked that out loud to us, she was actually talking the code as she dragged those blocks over and locked them together. So again, even when the students are just beginning and they're just dragging and dropping nodes, they're actually learning code in the back of their minds. And that code can easily be translated over. Our introductory for schools is basically Space Rocks, which is a play on the old Asteroids arcade game. It's an introduction to GameMaker because it gives you a little bit of physics. It helps you learn about objects. It's a short tutorial of a complete game so that the students can get in 1 or 2 class periods and actually just create a game that they can play, they can have their friends play. So they can very quickly get the tool, they can start having a command of the tool. And this is why I'm just so much in favor of this being able to be used in other things, because the tool's not going to get in the way. You're not going to spend the whole first semester just learning to use the game engine. Kids are very resilient and really quick to pick up on using GameMaker, especially that we're in a 2D space. We have video and written tutorials. And again, we have different versions in either the visual, using GML visual, or using GML code versions. We have just redesigned the whole Space Rocks. We do have, hopefully next week, we're going to be releasing the new Educator's Guide, which gives teachers a full guide on the vocabulary and the things that the kids will be doing, why they're doing them. And it's a pretty fast way for teachers to get on board if they've never ever programmed or they've never ever done any game design. There's a student workbook that will go along with it, as well as the written tutorial and a video tutorial. And I'm going to show you a little snippet of the video tutorial just to give you an idea of just how quickly and easily and straightforward it is.
Frank, is it possible to add the sound?
Oh, did it not come through?
No, it didn't.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's the best part of it. Um, I do not know why the sound wouldn't come through. Hold on. Still no sound?
Sorry, I was muted. No, there's no sound.
I'm so sorry, folks. If it's I may not be able to. Did that change, Christy?
No, that didn't fix it for you. Maybe if you want to send me the link and I can include a link to the video in the
I will
follow-up
do
email.
that. Yes, I'm so sorry about that. I do not know why. It looks like I have everything set here the way it should have been. I'll have to work on that. Sorry. Well, moving on. Anyway, if you heard Gurpreet, you would love it because the reason I played that video was mainly for the sound. Although I think you can see that the step-by-step, Gurpreet really takes his time to make sure that each and every area is covered. We have more tutorials as well. Again, there's a huge amount of resources on our YouTube channel. There are written tutorials and video tutorial links as well on our website. And I will make sure that Christy gets the link for that whole tutorial so you can watch the tutorial. Again, I've been able to just follow the video, and it was about 15-20 minutes, and I had an asteroids game. So it's a pretty easy way to get in and actually learn some of the basics of game design and game making. We also have some other complete games that have full tutorials where they create and complete a game. There are more in-depth tutorials. There's the video and written tutorials, as I said. And then there's Fire Jump as well as Little Town, which are different kind of platformer games. And then the big news that I have is that we're also right now in the midst of taking the Little Town game, which is a basic platform game, and we are changing that for next fall. We're doing a full rework, and that game will now be part of the Digital Citizenship Institute and teaching digital citizenship. And the reason for that is we're going to take it so that you can just take the template, you bring the template up. It won't be about creating the game as much as changing the game and making the game your own game using the digital citizenship pillars that we want kids to use. And it's my hope that we can go as far down as, basically fourth grade, all the way up to parents and grandparents, and they can be able to easily mod, as not so much game design, but be able to mod the games and use the games in their own ways using these digital citizenship pillars that we want the kids to learn about being good digital citizens. Again, we do have short tutorials. We have an area for frequently asked questions, and we do support students during creation of independent games. So if they're doing a how-to individual project, they're going to get a lot of support in creating those. So the teacher doesn't necessarily have to be an expert in game design to get started with this. And we have a huge amount of resources. We have, basically, there's blogs. We have a whole blog area just devoted now to education. We have more and more education articles every day. We have the GameMaker YouTube channel, and we have a huge GameMaker community out there who are always willing to help. And we have some Discord channels. There are game jams, and game jams are another big thing that unless you're in the gaming community, you may not know about them. But we will have, there's game jams all the time that happen. They may happen just over a weekend. You may have, basically 48 hours in which teams or individuals will create games in that 48 hours based on a theme that they just got at the beginning. And those are often for cash and prizes. And we also have a plan that we're going to be doing a game jam for lesson plans using game design, in which teachers will be able to win things, some pretty good resources for their classrooms, because we know that teachers today are pretty strapped and they don't get a lot of money for their classrooms. So we're working on creating more of an educational community within the whole GameMaker ecosystem, I can say. I'd show you this because it talks more about the narrative and dialogue, but I'll set this link in there as well. This just shows you kind of how easy it is to create narratives and dialogue branching scenarios, where by choosing one to speak to one person, you're going to get a dialogue. And then if you're choosing to speak to another one, and just how easy it is, even with third-party softwares, because we partner with so many people to create resources for our game engine. And as I said earlier, without all the music and all the sound, it's just not going to be as good. So I will definitely get you some links to that so you can see. And I'm sorry that my sound's not working on here. I obviously have something I got to work on. So how do you get GameMaker? Well, you're going to get GameMaker. You're going to, Christy's going to have some information at the end of this for us. But the way our licensing system works now is that the educator, the educator, will get one seat, and then that seat can be used unlimited number of times for your students. We don't collect any student info. Student identity is protected in this way. The kids don't have to have their name. You could just use plain numbers within your class. And that information isn't going to be housed by us. So basically, we will just have you as the teacher in our records that you're using, that you're coming in. And everyone, if you have 30 students, we'll see 30 students, but we won't know each of those and the students themselves. There are two educator license options, and I'm going to speak to both of these today. The first one is the Educator Edition. So in the Educator Edition, you basically you get GameMaker. You have access to all of our learning resources. The games can be exported to the GX Games. GX Games is a platform, a lot like I want to say Steam or some other places where games are housed. So the kids will be able to share their games. I've been working with GX Games division, and they are trying, it's on their roadmap to get us just an education area so that the games that kids make won't be just mixed in with all of the other games that may be out there. I am hoping that within the next, this following quarter two, that we are going to have that come to a reality. And then, of course, you can just put the games down on their desktops, and they can play the games on the computers themselves. So you have those options. If you move up to the Achiever license, again, gets you GameMaker. It gets you the learning resources. It gives you GX Games export on the desktop, but it now adds what we think probably is more higher education, and probably more like colleges, but you can now start to do mobile exports and console exports. And that includes PlayStation, Xbox, all mobile phones. We just don't feel that at the younger ages, and maybe not until the end of high school, that being in a way distracted by the mobile exporting and the web exporting and the console exporting may not just be what we, where we want the kids to be. But those are the two Educator licenses. So basically it's the Educator and the Achiever edition. And now I'll let Christy take the next steps, although I think, did I get the email? Oh yeah, I think I got it all right. So I'll let Christy take it away on next steps. Thanks for listening to me today. Sorry about the sound. I will go right to work on that and make sure that never happens again in our presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. We just had one question. Does
Okay.
this work on Chromebook?
That is another thing that I've, again, I came, I'm a 15-year educator. I've been using GameMaker for, well, at least 15 years. And I came out of retirement because I just feel so strongly about this game engine and it's the way it can be used in education. One of the things that I said when I came straight in is I asked that same question, can we use this on Chromebook? And they said, well, we're working on it. That was at the beginning of this year. I have not gotten an update at where they are, but I know that it is a large thing on our roadmap right now to make this work with Chrome, because I just told them in the United States, education, Chromebook is a pretty big deal.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you for that presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is basically, if you have any questions about GameMaker, if you need a quote or any further information, you can respond to my email, or you can just email info@studica.com. And you can expect a follow-up email from me soon with a link to the recording, and I'll make sure I have those links for you from Frank. And I just wanted to thank you all for your participation today and tell you all to have a great day. Thank you.